Good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. I'm Ethan Collier, and I chair the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission, and wanted to go over a couple things before we get started. There have been some slides that have been playing overhead in regards to procedure for the meeting. The basics are pretty simple. Planning Commission has gotten this packet in the mail about a week ago, and this covers all the cases and all the recommendations and all the information that staff has to share here today. As we go through the meeting today, I'll read off the case numbers, and in every case, I'll ask whether or not there's any opposition present. If you're here and you have some sort of question or concern, or you're in opposition to the case, please make sure that you're following along closely and that you raise your hand when I ask if there's any opposition present. Because if there's no opposition present, and we have a staff recommendation to approve, then oftentimes Planning Commission takes action without hearing from the applicant, the opposition, or the staff. So at times throughout our meeting today, it moves rather quick, and then at other times it feels like it's moving in slow motion. But when it's moving quick, pay attention. When there is opposition, we will first hear from the applicant. The applicant will come up, we'll normally hear from the staff first. The staff will do their presentation. Then the applicant will have 7 minutes to present their case. Then after the applicant's finished, we'll have 9 minutes for the opposition. In total, if you're here and you're in opposition and you wish to speak, it's really important that you actually get up out of your chair and come up and line up on my left, your right side of the room behind the podium here, so that I can see that there's a number of people that want to speak, and make sure that you all have an opportunity to speak. So opposition has a total of 9 minutes, and then after that, the applicant has 2 minutes to respond. So when you come up to the mic, make sure, which is right over here, make sure you state your name and address for the record. There's a red light that's on the mic. I don't think you'll need to do anything, but make sure it's on so that we can hear you. Also, in most of the cases that we'll hear today, in regards to, it's 90% of what's on the agenda, Planning Commission is making a recommendation to either the County Commission or the City Council. And so these cases will be heard next month at the County Commission or City Council. So if you're here as an applicant, make sure that you know those dates when they will be at the legislative bodies. And then also, if you're here in opposition, make sure that you're following along so that you can also attend those meetings if you so desire. So with that being said, we can go ahead and jump right in. Dan, have I missed anything? Okay, and there are a number of Planning Commission members that are sitting down here. It is really hard for me to see you. I'll look to my right and I'll look to my left. So I think Mayor Kelly may be joining us. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. First case under subdivision plats and variances is SD 2022-0023. And this is a revised Bella Ridge Phase 5, lots 206 through 294. And this has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we've got a couple cases under old business. The first of which is 2022-0097, and this is located at the 7500 block of Stanford Gap Road. And this is an application to rezone from R1 to RTZ. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And in regards to the conditions, do you have any? We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0113. This is item 2 under old business, and this is located at 5117 Gooden Lane and 1326 Mayfield Lane in the 1400 block of Gadd Road. And this is an application to rezone from R1 to R3 and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Do you have any questions or concerns with the conditions? Okay, you do want to speak to those? Brian, would you mind?
Sure. I'll go to straight to the conditions.
Thank you.
There were actually staff had 8 conditions. 4, which are shown in red on the screen. Those were in agreement. Staff agreed with the applicant when he submitted his request. It was to rezone conditions. Conditions 5 through 8 were staff additional conditions that were added through staff review of zoning. We sent these conditions to the applicant. He reviewed those conditions and then wrote back a response, which is on your screen, with some changes or tweaks. Condition number 1 basically stays the same. It's talking about a 6-foot vinyl coated chain link fence. The only difference is highlighted in red. Instead of saying boundary, it says boundaries, and add a S to the area. It should be areas. Condition number 2, there was no change regard to compactor and dumpster. Number 3 was no change, talking about building heights within a certain distance from the right of way of Old Hickson Pike. Condition number 4 was the same between staff and the applicant. Condition number 5, there was a change here. This change from staff stated a 20-foot type landscape buffer shall be provided as shown along the northern boundary of the development where the development abuts parcel numbers 9, 3, and 11. According to the applicant, which we agree, parcel 11 was part of the previous zoning case and does not abut this property. There's no need to include parcel 11 as providing a type B landscape buffer. So the applicant's requesting that be removed from the condition. Condition number 6 is in regard to setback. Applicant and staff both agree on that condition. Same thing with condition number 7 about access to Gooden Lane or no access from Gooden Lane. Staff and applicant both agree. And then condition number 8, there's some tweaking to this language. It's highlighted in red. Pedestrian connection, strike the word required to neighboring Vandergraft Park, strike otherwise, unless otherwise prohibited by City of Chattanooga, shall be made if achievable with final site plan as agreed by the developer and the City of Chattanooga staff. So you can see it's a little tweaking of the conditions, but otherwise staff would agree and support the applicant's revisions to the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Go ahead.
Ian Blackmore, Pratt & Associates, 107 Marlboro Ave. As Brian had stated, it's just some minor wording to condition 5 and 8. He pretty much covered 5 that we're not abutting that parcel, so that shouldn't apply. Part of the previous rezoning. It's really the last one about whether that pedestrian connection, just the verbiage about requiring, if achievable, it would be the rear portion of our site connecting to Vandergrift Park. They are adjacent to each other. However, that's all existing 3-to-1 slopes in that area. So we're going to have to probably have some retaining walls in the stormwater management areas. So, until we have a final design, I'm just finding it difficult to achieve that and or commit to something that may not be accessible.
So to be clear, what's stated in red, you would be amenable to?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if staff was or not, but it wasn't what I had in the final staff report.
Yeah, staff's agreeable with those conditions. That's written.
Mr. Schultz, it seems to me, and I mean, you guys clearly have a level of comfort with it, but condition 8 to say shall be made is absolutely has to be made. But then it is with the caveat that if it's possible or if it's achievable, and then it goes on to say as agreed by developer and the City of Chattanooga staff, which all seem ambiguous.
Right. Planning Commission could, so choose to just remove that shall. You could say pedestrian connection to neighboring Vandergrift Park, if achievable, final site plan as agreed by the developer and the City of Chattanooga staff.
We could remove condition 8 altogether if that is agreeable. Like I said, it's going to be almost impossible to make a accessible connection between the two parcels at that area. So I'd look to you guys for feedback on the verbiage.
Mr. Schultz, can you show us where? That
Yeah, on the screen's the site plan. Basically, this detention pond is. This is Vandergrift Park.
The reason there's probably no improvements in Vandergrift Park there is because of the steep slopes.
We go to the aerial view to show you exactly where that. Here's what's being rezoned, highlighted in red, and the park is right here.
Okay.
And this red part's the detention pond. So it is going to be somewhat difficult to get back there, but they also own this property here that's already been rezoned to R3. There's other ways to possibly get pedestrian connection to that park.
Okay.
But this area outside the red is not part of this zoning case.
Gotcha. Mr. Varun,
I apologize. Was there any opposition to this case?
there was none.
Unless there is, I don't know, any desire to have open dialogue about this one, I would move to approve striking number 8. But I would just encourage you all to look at that. I've been to that park with my kids before. I know the slopes are tough. I've actually hiked those trails and kind of explored back there. So as long as you guys can, let's put an asterisk in there, just look at it. So we would encourage you to try and create that connectivity. I'd move to approve striking number 8.
And just to clarify, with the language we're reading here, your motion is striking number 8, and in regards to 5, is it with the?
As it reads on the screen, if that's acceptable to the applicant.
It'd be the applicant's revised conditions or
Okay.
regarding the conditions.
And then who seconded that? And are we clear that that's what you seconded? We have a motion and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
First item under new business is case 2022-0125. And this is located at 1850 Newell Avenue. And this is an application to rezone from R1 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And do you have any issue with the condition that it be detached, single-family residential 4 units? We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is a mandatory referral, MR 2022-0126. And this is located at 500 block of Crutzen Street. And it's for right-of-way closure. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is mandatory referral 2022-0128. And this is located at 1007 and 1009 Winthrop Street. And this is also a right-of-way closure and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 on our agenda, case 2022-0129, is located at 1558 Vance Road. And it's an application to rezone from R2 and C2 with conditions to R3 residential zone. In this case, has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? You're both applicant? Okay. And in regards to the conditions, do you want to make any comments? You do. Okay. Mr. Schultz.
Sure. I'll just go straight to the conditions, if you will. Staff reviewed this and was comfortable with the rezoning request. There is no land use plan that provides guidance, so we fell back to the comp plan. Comp plan did support some type of higher density use at this location. Because of the steep slopes, staff felt it was important to put conditions on the property to limit the number of units and the building height because of the steep hillside this is located on. So we came up with 3 conditions. So it was approved subject to maximum of 336 residential units, which is what was indicated on the site plan submitted with a request. Building heights limited to max of 4 stories. And condition number 3, because this is on the hillside and steep, in a steep slope area, staff was trying to limit the amount of disturbance that could occur on the site. So staff drafted the condition prior to issuance of a land disturbance permit. Applicant shall identify 10 acres anywhere on the site to remain undisturbed, and such area shall be delineated on site with high visibility fencing or other method as determined by the Land Development Office. This area is to remain undisturbed except for the removal of dead and diseased trees or the removal of invasive species. So staff is being very not sure where to identify 10 acres, but giving it to the applicant to identify those 10 areas that shall be set aside as reserved areas. So those are the 3 conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Councilman Ledford.
Brian, thank you.
I'm so sorry. Chairperson Ledford. Did I get it right?
No, it's man. I'm good.
It's chairman, chairman,
I'm
chairman.
Yeah, I'm good with man.
Okay.
Brian, quick question for you. Does this engage the steep slope vegetation component at all?
It does. We noted that in the staff report that let the applicant know that any disturbance over 35% or 33 would be required to meet that vegetative standard.
Okay. Will this be the first time this is tested since council?
I don't think so. I think we've had several cases that I've been before council.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So we are able to provide the first 2 conditions. However, we did want to ask about the 3rd condition for the 10 acres. We understand the steep slopes. So that's actually one of the things that's working against us here. And to achieve the density of 336 units with a max height of 4 stories, there's really not a way for us to provide that 10 acres. So we wanted to ask if it's possible to amend that to be 10% of the total site area, with the condition that we will be providing proposed vegetation along these slopes in addition to the trees that are left undisturbed. Just to provide you some context, the topography change from Vance Road to the top of the ridge is 150 feet. So we're working to grade out flat areas in the site without disturbing as many trees as we can. So it's our goal as well to keep as many existing trees. But given that, along with the fact that we're along the Brainerd Overlay District, which kind of constricts our ability to develop along Vance Road, these 2 factors kind of impact our ability to save trees here. And the last thing I wanted to mention is just in terms of the density, we can achieve that easily, but these surrounding uses also have a density much higher than what we are providing on this one. So we're just looking for a way to get that 336 units without having that 10 acres of undisturbed.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
And Mr. Chairman, for the reference, the total site acres is about 42 acres total. So if you do the 10%, I think that's about 4 acres, roughly 4 acres that they're asking to be set aside as not disturbed, where staff's recommending 10. Just based on percentages before, we've usually done 20% in certain areas, just looking at the site. Sometimes we've done topo lines, topo numbers. It's very difficult on this side as it looks like it's being terraced in. So it was difficult to come up with a number.
Brian, does the topo actually trigger the steep slopes ordinance?
No, it's when you're disturbing within a sloped area. So if he doesn't get in that 30, I think it's 35% or 33%. If he doesn't disturb that at all, 30, he would not kick in. Once you disturb that, it kicks into revegetating.
So there are portions of the site that, if disturbed, would trigger the steep slopes ordinance.
Correct. Where they would have to revegetate whatever's being disturbed. Only in that area where the steep slopes are.
Gotcha.
And I'll show the aerial map of the site that we can get. This is where staff's concerns was. That's the side of Vance and Lee Highway.
I have a question. Mr. Farmer.
I'm not sure I understand, Brian. I mean, if we pretty painstakingly went through the steep slopes process, I'm really glad Chairman Ledford's here for this conversation. I mean, if we went through this and it was agreed upon about developing in steep slopes, why really the need for recommendation number 3? If I feel like we've kind of covered that in steep slopes.
I'm gonna let Dan
Okay.
cleaned up. He's ready to take the answer.
No, I think you might have a good answer
No,
for that too.
go ahead.
I think in this case, when if you look at the side plan, I'm assuming, to your point, that there is, so when you disturb that area, you have to revegetate it, but you could clear cut those.
You could.
And I think in this case, they probably don't want to disturb a lot of that area that's shown in green because it is the steepest area of, that they would have to impact. They'd have to revegetate, it costs some money. I think they probably want to preserve as much as possible. I think what staff did is look at that plan and tried to estimate what they were already expecting to retain and then just put a number to it and said 10 acres. I mean, if you look at that plan, it's kind of, looks like at least a quarter of it is green. That's what happens when you put a bunch of green on a site plan. You get a plan. We're gonna interpret that to mean that you can reasonably accommodate 10 acres. But I think we would like it to be the maximum amount that's practical.
Mr. Lehman.
Yeah, just a question, I guess, Brian or Dan. Did you mention a comp plan? And I know Mr. Payne asked you relative to a percentage.
Right. We just does not fall in any adopted land use plan area. So it falls in the comp plan. Those are intensity levels. It's 5 being the highest intensity. Most of that was in 5. You do have a little bit of 1. Assume that's where the steep slopes are, but it doesn't specify percentage numbers to be set aside as a policy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And I think I was at a neighborhood meeting the applicant had 2 weeks ago or last week sometime. The water tower on the site is staying. There were about 20 people at the neighborhood meeting. Nobody was really concerned about, clearing the site. It was more about traffic on Vance Road. I didn't hear any opposition at all to the development.
So the 20% that you mentioned was just, and I think to Dan's point, it was looked like that was the appropriate, or at least the amount that was shown on the site plan. Right. It sounds like the developer may be thinking somewhere around 10%.
It was a guesstimate, just looking at that site plan, trying to guess at what that percentage could be.
So I think the difference between staff and the applicant somewhere between 10%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a quick question for the applicant. So, one thing there, we've talked about the green on the site plan, but because it's shown green on there doesn't mean it will be undisturbed necessarily. So you may end up having to disturb some of that area, but you will plan to revegetate it as putting in infrastructure and stuff of that nature. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, the 10% is just we're just a little concerned that with erosion control devices and utility installations, it's going to be hard to achieve 10 acres of just no touching, right? So we'll definitely revegetate the areas where slopes are disturbed.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Ledford.
I yield.
Oh, well, I agree with the questioning, and I really don't think that 10 acres is appropriate. And I believe the applicant says 4 acres would be sufficient. So I move that we change item 3 to 4 acres.
So we have a motion to approve with an amended condition, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
Ask them another question.
Chairman Ledford.
Gentlemen, you are, as I mentioned earlier, you're aware of the steep slope vegetation component we have implemented in the city, and you're okay with that. Okay, that was a really key point, and the reason that we wrote that was for situations exactly like this. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda, item 5, 2022-0130 is located at the 300 block of North Highland Park Avenue. And it's a application to rezone from R3 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0131, and this is located at 1302 Gad Road. And it's an application to rezone R2 to R3. And staff has recommended to deny the applicant's request and approve R3 MD with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, this is item 6 on our agenda. It's case 2022-0131 located at 1302 Gad Road. Is the applicant present?
Emily just stated the applicant emailed us today, or sometimes going to have, he couldn't make it, was going to have a representative here today.
You don't happen to be the representative for the Gad Road case, do you?
No,
Okay.
he's not.
All right.
I have a question for Brian.
Chairman
Brian?
Ledford.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Your R3MD, that would move that into form-based code.
I know. So this is a regular R3
Our
MD
regular R.
Euclidean zone.
We're just taking it into medium density.
Yes, it restricts you to 4 units per structure, per lot, sorry. And our condition was 1 curb cut per lot. He has 4 lots. I think per lot he's shown 2 curb cuts. We try to condition that. Do you want, option is deferred if he's here next month, or?
I think we should take action on it. It'll be city council.
Yeah, I'm gonna move to approve because I think Councilman Smith will have a great opportunity to take the reins on this.
Your motion is to approve the staff's recommendation.
It is.
We have a motion and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0133. And this is located at 1248, 59, and 81 Lester Lane. And this is an application to rezone R2 and C5 to C2. And staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And in regards to, thank you. We have a motion to approve with conditions and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 8 on our agenda, mandatory referral 2022-0134 is located at the 1600 block of Rossville Avenue. And it's for right-of-way closure and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we did receive one letter in opposition to this. It should be on your Google sheet that you have about the opposition.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0135, and this is located at 1413 North Concord Road, 6957, 31, and 06 Concord Circle, and 2 unaddressed parcels in the 6900 block of Concord Circle. And it's an application to rezone R1 and R3 and R4 with conditions to C2. And staff is recommended to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? And as the applicant, do you have any questions in regards to conditions? You want to speak to this? Mr. Schultz?
Sure. Staff, I was going straight to conditions. If somebody else wants to hear the whole case, but the conditions are staff was comfortable with the condition, with the rezoning to C2 We did talk about 4 conditions, or recommending 4 conditions. Those are restricted to uses only: residential, office, and restaurant. Curbside pickup allowed, uses only. Condition number 2, billboards and drive-throughs prohibited. Condition number 3, because this does abut residential to the west and north, a 50-foot wide landscape buffer planted in compliance with type A landscape buffer requirements along the shared property line where it abuts R1 to the west and north. And finally, condition number 4, a 6-foot tall opaque fence shall be installed on the shared property line abutting R1, again, which is to the west and north of the site. So we had 4 conditions trying to protect this neighborhood just to the west and north of this site.
All right,
Somebody else.
Mr. Farmer.
So that, am I right? That's a landscape buffer and a fence on the same side?
That's correct.
That's the recommendation. Okay,
That's the
thank you.
recommendation.
Hey, Brian, this zone requires a type B normally, doesn't it?
Yes, anywhere it's abutting residential.
Okay.
We go to the site plan. Here's the site plan. Again, you see a lot of parking, restaurants there in the middle. Again, this could be changed, of course.
Sure.
But we're trying to, again, protect that residential to the west and north by the buffer and the fence. The fence is trying to help, alleviate any traffic light or car lights hitting the residential.
And that's why you went to a type A.
Yes, which is a 30-foot, increasing that buffer.
50 is what you have.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. But it's planted with a type A spacing
But the
requirements.
zoning request does call for a type.
Type B, which is 20 foot.
20.
We're increasing that to 50
Okay.
by 30 foot.
That's all I need for now. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Mr. Newhoff.
Yes, Pat Newhoff Taylor Architects. We're fine with the 6-foot opaque fence as well as the billboards. The type B buffer, if we go to to type A, it's 30 more feet, which is essentially a half an acre of this property. And I think we can buffer it properly with what the code requires. And we're adding a fence to that. So we're fine with that. And then also the way that it's written, it prohibits anything other than just residential, office, or restaurant. And we have enough room to do something else if we needed to. So we feel like that's an overreach. And as well, the drive-through right now, especially with COVID, taking a drive-through out is almost a kiss of death for a restaurant. So I see no reason, if we have a good buffer, why that would be required.
What the condition states is drive-throughs are prohibited, but we are allowing in condition number 1 the curbside pickup that's happening now a lot of places. This was an attempt to control like a typical drive-through to see the restaurant, because that residential is to the west and north of this site. But you can, but the conditions written, you still can have curbside pickup.
Mr. Farmer.
Mr. Newhoff, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking for. I got the type B and the fence, but on I wasn't real clear on staff recommendation number 1, what you're asking for. A residential, office, and a restaurant with a drive-through, or were you looking for other? Were you suggesting other uses as well?
Well, right now, there is not a signed LOI, or this is trying to get a tenant to this. And so by bringing it down to just those 3 uses is very compelling to not being able to do it.
Did you have some other uses that you might have suggested.
Oh, Sammy's.
Good afternoon, Bassam Isa. So right now we have a restaurant. That's what we showed. And these guys are kind of at this moment, we don't know. They haven't signed an LOI like they should have, and they may have found another location. So they haven't told us 100% which way it's going to go. I had another restaurant, same way, sit down restaurant, or and also they're iffy about it. But I do have two, one coffee and one fast food, and they both require drive-through. And this is a very expensive piece of property, and the B buffer is the one that fit us better. Otherwise, I can't put those two uses, and I can't make the development works. Now it costs $300 plus for the building alone. This site is need a lot of site work because it's sloped badly, so it's impossible to do. But when you look at the other side, there is drive-through with Baskin Robbins. We will do buffer. We're willing to do whatever, 6 feet, or even if you want another foot or two, that's fine. For solid fence, I'm fine with that. We could even be more careful and have the lighting to be away from the neighborhood. But also, I'm negotiating with all these neighbors. They want to sell and get out. So that's another situation that this is more likely, possibly, there's not going to be any residential around it. So, but for this piece of property, we got to have whatever uses the C2 allows. We're not going to do anything. My way of doing things, I have never done, for example, a gas station. I don't care about a gas station. I want something nice. I'm going to put something nice. Whoever I bring will be nice, but I need to have my hands free to be able to make a profitable development, basically.
Mr. Farmer. Chairman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Issa, we've been talking about this project for quite a while, and there's a reason there is no opposition here. Normally in a case like this, we would see tremendous opposition with
Yes.
a C2 abutting an R1, especially with the buffer in conversation. So there's a reason, because there's a much larger plan in place that I
Yes, sir.
am aware of. And I applaud you. You were right. You bring great products to the East Brainerd area. I asked you for a Trader Joe's. You brought a Trader Joe's.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
And everything you've built has been A1. So given that conversation that's ongoing, and I'm aware of, and knowing this will move forward into city council arena next, I'm going to make a motion to approve striking the drive-through section and moving item 3 to a type B landscape buffer. Will that
Thank you,
work?
sir.
Will that
Yes,
work for you to be able to continue that conversation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's my motion, sir.
We have a motion, and it has been properly seconded with modified conditions. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just on that condition, something for the council commission, that if that is a type B they want to go to, there's no need for that, as the code requires that.
That is
Anyway.
correct. So you can just strike 3.
Strike 3 if you want
Yes.
to.
Yep. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Newhoff,
You do have this.
you have
right
one
away.
other case associated with this one.
It's MR 2022-0143, and it's 1413 North Concord Road and 6900 block of Concord Circle. And it's a mandatory referral for right-of-way closure. I'm assuming there's no opposition present. Is there any?
Move to approve.
And we have a motion to approve. It has been properly seconded. Any discussions?
Yeah.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Item 11 on our agenda is case 2022-0148, and this is located at the 7200 block of Snow Hill Road. And it's an application to rezone R1 to A1 and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is 2022-0136, and this is also located at 7200 block Snow Hill Road. And this is an application for a special permit for a cemetery. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. And it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 13 on our agenda is mandatory referral 2022-0137, and this is located at 3709 and 3819 Holding. And I'm sorry. I don't know what those numbers are.
That's the name of the LLC.
3709-3819 Holding. Yeah, sorry. I mistook that for an address.
I know that as well.
1500 block of East 38th Street. And has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 14 on our agenda, case 2022-0138, is an unaddressed fringe road, and it's an application to amend conditions. Staff has recommended approving amended conditions number 1 from ordinance number 13475. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Oh, I'm sorry. It's dark back there. I cannot even see you. And you're wearing black, so it's hard to see you back there. Do you want to comment on this? Okay, thank you. With the staff recommendation?
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is item 14, case 2022-0139, and this is located at 1126 East 8th Street. And this is an application to rezone URD2 to URA3 and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0140. And this is located at 7548 and 7554 Igu Gap Road. And it's an application to rezone R1 to R1 with conditions and RTZ, and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present?
Move to approve.
We do have a motion to approve and it has been seconded. Is, assuming you're the applicant, and I'm assuming you have some comments on the conditions.
I do. Did you want staff to make their report first?
Yes, please.
And we did receive opposition via email. I think it's in your Google sheet. But this is a request to rezone from R1 to R1 with conditions and RTZ. You can see on the screen, there is some RTZ to the northwest, but everything else around this property is R1. Applicant provided 3 conditions. Stormwater, R1s to be conditioned to the following: stormwater facilities, community amenities, and outdoor recreation facilities only. There's been no zoning history for this particular piece of property. However, there has been adjacent zonings nearby. This was a church. I believe this church has now since been destroyed due to the tornadoes a couple years ago. But to the north is single family and a school. You have single family detached to the east and northeast of the site. To the south and west is single family detached, and into the northwest where you have the other RTZ or RT1, that's single family attached. Here's a view of the site. Another view of the site where the church used to be. This is a view south of the site, some of the single-family detached dwellings. And this is south of the site. West of the site, again, you see more single-family detached dwellings. This is in the Hamilton Place Community Plan 2001, which recommends low to medium density, which is typically 5 dwelling units an acre or less. This is also in our current draft Area 11 plan, which again has not been adopted, but it's in the drafting stages or final adoption stage, if you will. And that place type recommendation is suburban residential. Primary uses are single family. Secondary uses are townhomes with limited massing of up to 4 units per building. Staff recommendation was to approve, subject to 2 conditions, as the request does comply with Area 11 draft plan and Hamilton Place Community Plan. So staff recommends to approve the R1, subject to the following conditions: stormwater facilities, community amenities, and outdoor recreation facilities, which again was at the request of the applicant. And condition number 2, following the draft land use plan recommendation, townhomes, which is an RTZ, shall have not more than 4 units per building, which is recommended by that place type designation. So this comes to you with two conditions.
Mr. Price.
Thank you. Mike Price, MAP Engineers. So as Brian has alluded, we do meet the requirements of the land use plan. The one thing that we would ask for is that townhomes shall not be limited to more than 5 units per building. And if you look at the site plan that we have attached, and I think the reason that, again, I'm assuming here, so that's dangerous, but at the end of the day, where we show the 5-unit buildings, 1 of which occurs on Terry Lynn Drive, 3 of which occur on Igo Gap Road, none of those have driveway access to either Terry Lynn or Igo Gap. So I would think that the reason that 4 typically was the number that was put in the land use plan is to sort of cut down the number of driveways, but because we're internally providing access with 1 curb cut only onto Igo Gap Road, and landscaping those areas along Terry Lynn Drive as well as Igo Gap, that to ask to go to 4 to 5 is not a reach or hard ask or really going against what the land use plan tenants were simply trying to create. So our only ask would be is that we change it to allow to be no more than 40 units, which is what the plan shows, and that only the 5-unit buildings as shown on the plans be allowed to occur. Everything on the interior is 4 units, but we do have 4 5-unit buildings that are running around the perimeter. So that would be our only ask, is that that we'd be allowed to go from 4 to 5 on those particular units.
Chairman Ledford.
Brian, can I tie the site plan here?
There is a PUD plan that's next on next case. It will be tied to that PUD plan. Now, on the 4-unit massing, that was an attempt to keep it compatible with adjacent single family, not necessarily the curb cuts. That's my understanding. That I think it's what the intent was.
And we talked a little bit about that at the community meeting. So I'm going to amend my motion to remove condition number 2. Mr. Price, does that put us within the PUD confinement?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And then that will be an amended motion. Thank you.
We do have an amended motion, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Kelly, welcome to our meeting. Glad to have you here.
Got the next one.
Next case on the agenda, item 17, case 2022-0141 is located at 7548 and 7554 Igo Gap Road. And this is a special permit for residential plan unit development and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
This will tie the site plan to the ordinance.
That is correct. As PUDs, they are adopted. That site plan, it can be tweaked. The applicant has to come back through the process to tweak that.
Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, the next case on the agenda is Agenda item 18, it's case 2022-0142, and this is located at 2101 and 2103 South Watkins Street. And this is an application to lift conditions. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 19 on the agenda, mandatory referral 2022-0144. And this is located at Block 1, Ridgeside Road and Preston Avenue. And this is a mandatory referral for a right-of-way closure and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present? Thank you. We do have opposition. Mr. Schultz.
Sure. This is in the city of Ridgeside. This is a request for mandatory referral to abandon public right-of-way. As you can see on the screen, it's currently zoned R1. I have on the screen now the names of the adjacent property owners. The request is there, located right here between Amicus and Doria, I guess. Doria. Orlando's to the west. This alley comes up to the middle of Amicus and Dorio. Oops, go back. And then you see the adjacent property owners, Amicus, Moore, McFerrin, and then the city of Ridgeside. I believe Mr. Moore is the one here in opposition to the abandonment request. Here's a view of the right-of-way from Shalford Road. You can see it's abandoned, never was opened. It has a lot of overgrowth and trees. Here's an aerial view of where that right-of-way is. The applicant is requesting to abandon. It's right here in the L-shaped. Here's a view of the two homes, Micus on the left-hand side and Dory on the right-hand side. This is the right-of-way here. There is it's like an existing driveway in between those two property owners. Another view of what that right-of-way looks like. Again, a portion of it is opened or constructed for, it's like basically a parking lot for the two property owners. Another view of what that looks like. Here's a site plan that was submitted with this request. Again, it's to abandon a portion of this right-of-way. Staff recommended approval of the right-of-way closure and abandonment based on shared ownership. There has been a significant private interest shown in abandoning the property, and there will be no landlocked property as a result. If you look at the map, there's right-of-way. It's not closing the entire length of this right-of-way. It's only closing a small portion of it. Mr. Moore, the Moore family owns this. There is existing right-of-way that would remain to his property. McFerrin would also have access. Micus owns both of these. Is where the right-of-way is attempting to be closed. And Doria owns a portion of it to be closed. But it looks like everybody else does appear to have right-of-way to their property. We'll see what opposition says today, but it looks just based on the aerial map and the ownership, there's actually not a road there, but it's not being requested to be abandoned, so they still have access via public right-of-way.
Mr. Schultz, where's the access to McFerrin property if that right-of-way is closed?
It would be through.
Oh, from the other end?
For the other end. I'm not sure how far back that pavement goes. It looks on the aerial view, it doesn't even go to McFerrin's property.
Sure.
Maybe the applicant, the opposition can explain that further.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Okay. Can you come on up? So the applicant has 7 minutes.
I'm
to
quite
present the
nervous.
Don't be
Since
nervous.
this affects my family, and as you see, the other lots up there, there are no existing houses.
Can you state your name? and
I'm
address
sorry,
for the
Drew
record?
Harris at 7 Ridgeside Road.
Thank you.
I am, Mike is my husband. This closure of the right-of-way would positively affect 3 property owners in existence that have houses along that area. And it would negatively affect no existing houses. There's, as you said, there's a access from Shallowford. And if you look at it, there could even be future access from Shepherd Avenue in there through an existing alleyway that's there. The driveway, as you say, is not really a driveway. It's a driveway now because we don't have any garages to park in. So part of this wanting the right of way to be abandoned is that we could put a garage back there on the only flat part in our lawn. And if you mowed my lawn, you would know that's the only flat part. And so right now, considered as a street, our two houses that park on that side, we're actually in violation of a city ordinance where you're not supposed to park on city streets. So that's also a consideration. I think in the record, we have all three property owners that would be positively affected by this. They have submitted letters in support of the closure of it. And any other questions I can answer for you. But I think there's still plenty of access to Mr. Moore's property.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant before we hear from the opposition? Thank you, ma'am. We'll hear from those that are here in opposition, then you'll have the opportunity to speak again.
Hello. I'm Kirby Yost from Chambliss, Bonner and Stoffel, and I represent Mr. Moore, who's also a colleague of mine, for whatever that's worth. So keeping this picture up here, I guess I'll start with Mr. Moore and his family owns all those properties. He lives in this neighborhood also. He's bought these over the years and is now interested in selling them. And although it looks like there is access from Shallowford on an aerial map, practically speaking, if you're familiar with that road, the sharp curve right there, we're not sure that you actually could turn into the alleyway from the Shallowford side, practically speaking, and whether or not it would get approved, for example, for like emergency vehicles to go that way to access those homes. So big picture, sort of stepping back, Mr. Moore is interested in selling this property and has told the commissioners that as well, because he wants to work with them to get it done. And it's not long after he mentioned that to one of the commissioners is when this application was filed. And I say that only to say there hasn't been sufficient time to really know a plan yet of what is going to happen with this property. He and potential buyers, Jay Robinson's here because he's spoken with some potential buyers for us. Everybody is interested in working with the town to figure out the access that makes the most sense. And if they can avoid that area and access one of these other ways, that's wonderful. We're just not far enough into the process yet to know if that's going to be possible, for the big reason being the emergency vehicles. And so all really what we would ask now is is deferral from a mandatory referral possibility.
I don't think it is.
The applicant would have to ask for deferral. Action has to be taken to move this on.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess Ridgeside, because their body can
Right.
choose to defer at that point.
Because ideally what we would like is really just time so that we can figure out what the plan is going to be, so that a home could be constructed back there. Because big picture wise, she's right, no houses are back there. But I don't believe in the law that the fact that you know, if you don't build during a certain period of time, you somehow lose the right to want access. So we just want to preserve access, and we don't know yet if those other access routes are possible except on an aerial map. So ideally, whatever procedural mechanism we need to take to get additional time, that would be the best course. Part of the plan is also for him to donate some of this property to the town. So there will be several steps throughout the way that will require coordinating with the town. We've already met with other commissioners of the town to talk about some of this, and they'll be happy to keep doing that. But right now, there's just not enough information to know that it won't actually landlock him. And actually, let me let him introduce himself as well. Sorry, I took too much time.
Thank you. My name is Hugh Moore. I've lived in Ridgeside 42 years. If you look at that picture, I live on the bottom center of the picture, the house with the red tile roof, which is in the bottom center of the picture. And I've lived there for 40. What?
Shepherd.
It's at the corner of Shepherd and Ridgeside. Yes, I live right there. And we bought the house in 1980. I've lived there for 42 years. In addition to the lots that's shown, I own all the property around Shallowford. So I own all of that property. And I've bought it over the last maybe 30 years, 25 or 30 years. I've bought from several different property owners as the property became available. with an eye towards assembling the tract. I'm not a developer. I'm a lawyer. And I obviously, what I want is the best for the city of Ridgeside. I've lived there 42 years. We don't have any plans to move. I was a city commissioner of Ridgeside for one term. And like Ms. Yost said, well, first, let me back up a second. This access that the application is there to close, that's really that's what I've thought of for as long as I've owned the property. I've thought of that as the access. It's North Seminole Road is what it is. And it's never been opened because you had a variety of people owned all these lots in the bowl. It's the bowl as you come around Shallowford Road with the Shepherd Hills Pool down on the right. And I've always thought of that as the access. North Seminole, you would just open the access down into the property that way. And I retained I'm 77, I retained Mr. Robinson as an agent to help me sell the property. I don't want to develop it, I want to sell it. And it was after I retained an agent to sell the property that there was interest then in closing my access to the property. That is by far the most practical access to the property. And like Ms. Yo said, accessing that property off what looks like access on that area, you come around a sharp turn on Shallowford Road there. And I don't know how feasible that is. I don't know whether I don't know whether a curb cut would be allowed there for a substantial road. So anyway, I do oppose the closure. I've owned the property for a long time. I want the property. I want whoever, the city can buy the property if they want to, the city of Ridgeside. But I want whatever's done with the property to be something appropriate for the city of Ridgeside, where I've lived 42 years. I've raised 2 daughters there. I don't have any intention of, selling it to somebody who's going to do something to it that people wouldn't want. But I do object to the closure. So after I retain an agent to sell the property, then there's a move to close the major access to the property. And I object to that. And I'll take any questions anybody might have.
Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you can come back up. You've got a couple minutes to respond to the opposition.
On my own, or do you have questions?
Are there any questions? I don't know that there are any.
He talks about living there for 42 years. That's great. I've lived there for almost 7. I understand that gives me somewhat, in some people's view, a little less valuation in the city, but that's not true. My house looks over this part of the land. My kids play in the street there. This part of the Ridgeside is closer to the main street than other parts of Ridgeside, so that we don't have any place for the kids to play in the front. They have to play in this parkway, the parking area that we have. And yes, when he decided to sell that portion of the property and give it to some builder who's going to come in and decimate whatever trees or property is there to build houses, yes, that's when we decided to try to close that area, because we were protecting our interests as well. So I think there are interests on both sides. I don't think that the cut in the Shallowford access is as bad as he says. We have 4 other access points in Ridgeside off of Shallowford already. And again, off of Shepherd Avenue, which he also owns, there is an access that way. He could develop it there. So I think I directly answered most of his opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Schultz, quick question for you. If this is denied here, it goes on to the city council, Ridgeside City Council.
Correct.
And if anybody wants to come back and apply for this right-of-way closure again, is there any time limit on how soon?
On Ridgeside.
So action taken today, ultimately having some action also taken at Ridgeside doesn't necessarily negate anybody's future ability to close that.
No, and they can, before we decide to schedule on their commission or council agenda, they can have discussions between the two parties to
Sure.
work that out.
Okay, that's great. Mr. Farmer?
This to me is just a private property right issue. There's a bunch of parcels on the side that's indicated more and the side that Shallowford Road side that have always had this access. And I just feel like that's a super simple private property right issue. And I carefully, when I vote, I want to make sure that I'm not taking away somebody's property right. So at the time, I would be willing to make a motion to deny the applicant's request. There you go.
I think you just made a motion. We do have a motion and it has been seconded to deny the applicant's request. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if anyone is so inclined, I just want to remind you, we do have coffee in the back or anything else.
Yeah, we're concerned
snacks,
because you're
'cause-
offering coffee, but the bathrooms are on lockdown.
Well, we're working on that.
So that's a
The bathrooms
double-edged
are still
sword.
out front.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's willing to take you up. on
But I don't want to be the only one to remember this.
That's why
coffee.
we brought the mayor in today.
Well, if the mayor needs coffee, I will get you.
We can get those bathrooms open too.
Next case on the agenda is item 20. On our agenda, it's case 2022-0145, and it's located at 1820 and 30 Gray Road. And it's an application to rezone R1 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Mr. Price? Are you taking issue with the conditions? Is that what?
There's one point, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to bring to the attention, and then I'll let y'all decide which way, obviously, to go with it.
Would you mind going before we hear from Mr. Schultz? just so that
Absolutely.
we-
Could you go to the
we know
site
exactly
plan?
what it is we're looking at.
So we have the same condition as far as 4-unit buildings. And so I'm not opposed to that, but the only thing I would just point out to the members of the commission is that the only one that affects is that one in the corner, which has sort of got a couple of odd shaped units in there. The thought process in putting together that particular building that has 7 units was to not allow the ability for people on Igo Gap or on Gray Road to see into the development. If I go to 4, which I can do, and I'm perfectly happy to do that, I got to split the buildings, which now lets people see, if you will, into the back. The idea was to sort of keep this continual front going through the intersection. So if the staff recommendation is what you want to approve, that's fine. I'll break the building, if you will, in there, and I'll create a drive that will provide the garage access. But just understand that sort of that unintended consequence may not be what you really or the neighbors want to see. So I'm fine either way, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention to decide which way would be the best route that you see for us to move forward with.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Who? Yes, go ahead.
So you could build 2 4-unit buildings.
Or we would build a 4 and a 3, for instance, into there. So we would keep the density the same. This is not about trying to add units, but I do see that if we do this, we're going to create a break, if you will, which is at probably the most prominent point along the entire site is in the intersection.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, at the community meeting, we talked about not seeing it as part of a concern from people who were at the meeting. And I think that you made the right call on this particular item. So I'm going to make a motion to approve striking condition number 2.
We do have a motion with amended conditions that has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 20 on our agenda, case 2022-0146. It's located at 2000 Gun Barrel Road and 7555 Goodwin Road. And this is an application to rezone O1 and C2 to R1 and R3 and R4. And the application has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? And is the applicant present? All right.
Mr. Chairman, we also received email in opposition as part of your Google sheet of what their comments were.
Sure. Mr. Schultz, can you do the case
Sure.
report first?
Yeah, this is 2022-146. This is a request to rezone O1 to R3, R4, and R1. Looking at a zoning map, you have a mixture of zones in this location. You have R3 and C4 and C2 to the north. To the east is R1. To the south is R1, R4, RTZ. And you also have R3. And to the east is C2. So there's a mixture of different types of zones in this location. Proposed use is a school, single-family dwellings, apartments, and senior living. The overall acres being rezoned is about 72 acres. The total site acres is 90, but again, 72 is part of the rezoning. The school site, which is not being rezoned, is to remain O1. That's about 18.6 acres. The R1 zoned area or requested area is 49.4 acres in size. Proposing 230 units. That's a density of 4.7 dwelling units per acre. The R3 site, which is for the apartments, that's roughly 16 acres. Proposing 351 units. That's a density of 21.6. And finally, R4 for senior apartments. That's about 6.5 acres. Proposing 200 units. That's a density of 3.7. Overall, in this area, there's a dwelling count of about 781 dwellings with a total density count of 10.8. This property was rezoned back in 87 to 01. There's been various zoning histories nearby, like to the south, north for higher density zoning. This property is located at 2000 Gun Barrel Road and 7555 Goodwin Road. This is a zoomed out aerial view just showing you its location in relation to Hamilton Place Mall. It's about 1,600 feet to the east of Gun Barrel Road. Zooming in for a closer view, you see this used to be the Cigna building. It also has a large vacant piece of property around it. To the north is multifamily uses. To the east is single family detached. To the south is a school and multifamily attached. Multifamily apartments to the southwest, and to the east is all the commercial on Gun Barrel Road. Here's a view of the site. Another view of the site with the roundabout on Commons Boulevard. Just another view. This is a view of the existing, what used to be the Cigna office building on the property. This will now become a school. This is in the Hamilton Place Community Plan, which was adopted in 2001. That plan is roughly 21 years old. But at the time, Cigna was in operation, and the plan recommended office or campus use for this property, probably due to the use of an office. So the plan recommends commercial and office. Again, that plan is some 21 years old. Again, as I stated earlier, we're in the draft stage or final stages of the East Brainerd Area 11 plan, which does a land use based on place types. For the town center place type, which is the Cigna site, and AMC, which is the movie theater next door to this site, that recommends town center, and mixed residential for the vacant piece of property, which includes a wide variety of housing options. We did look at regional transportation analysis on this site. There's a lot of units proposed in this location based on the unit count. It's roughly 2,569 vehicle trips daily on Commons Boulevard. Senior living units would add approximately 740 vehicle trips daily on Commons Boulevard. And the single family residential would be roughly 2,100 vehicle trips. Plan implementation recommends that the developments be interconnected. This would help cut down the vehicle trips per day. So the development, all portions of this development should be interconnected. And finally, when this is written, there's a transportation impact study would be required during permitting. That has been provided to staff. So staff recommended to approve this request as it is in compliance with land use plans. It is surrounded by a mixture of uses, including single family and multifamily, also commercial, office and institutional uses. So staff recommended to approve 2 conditions: a traffic impact study to be conducted by the applicant for the entire development site and not each standalone development. It should be submitted to the city prior to permitting. That has been done as of last week. And pedestrian connectivity shall be provided between the multifamily residential development and the new school, and between the single family residential and the new school, unless otherwise prohibited by Hamilton County Department of Education. Sometimes the school department does not want those, especially vehicular connections. So we left it wide open to leave it up to the school and the applicant to have those discussions. This comes to the Planning Commission with 2 conditions. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Highlander.
Brian, help me here. Well, does the school have the authority to deny, or do they just work in conjunction with the builder?
You talking about the connection?
Yes.
They can deny. It's their property. They don't have to require it. We're just letting the developer work that out. Instead of requiring it, if the school board says no, the applicant would have to come back through a 3-month process to lift a condition. That's why we left it up to them to discuss.
And that's reasonable. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Did you have one?
Brian, the entire property right now is zoned 01, which means.
That's correct.
Which means an entire business complex could be built.
Correct. Any use in the 01 zone could go on this piece of property.
So we could technically, right now, without any objection from anybody, build 6, 7, and 8-story office buildings with parking lots 10 feet off of residential property as it's currently zoned.
You could, the height would be restricted to 35 foot, or you step back. So yeah, in theory, that's a big enough piece of property. You probably could get a 6-story building.
So, okay. So this is technically what we call a down zone.
As far as zones, yes, probably. I'd agree with that.
All right, I'll wait and hear the rest of the specs. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I have one.
Mr. Payne.
You said that if the schools choose not to be connected with pedestrian, that the applicant would have to come back for a 90-day.
No, the way we left it is if the school board does not agree to that, or the Department of Education, basically, that's not going to hold. They're not
He
held
can
to that
move right
condition.
through. He doesn't have to come back to this body.
Correct.
If the school, okay.
Correct. And here's a site plan to show you just where the school is in the center versus where these adjacent dwellings are. It makes sense to have some type of connection. That way, the thing down on traffic. So. No, that's why we left it unless prohibited by the school board or Department of Education.
Mr. Price.
Thank you. Mike Price, MAP Engineers. So we have no objections with regards to the staff's recommendations. Brian, I did provide, I think, some slides maybe to look at, so we could look at those. Here is sort of a colored map, which indicates what we are looking at proposing on the property. The green, so moving sort of right to left as you look at it, the green, which is what abuts Drake Forest, which is to our east, that is all single family residential. The purple to the north and the brown and the yellow, those all attached there to Commons Boulevard. And so the purple is the senior housing, the brown is apartments, and the yellow is currently the AMC old theater site that has been abandoned, and that will be converted to apartments as well. That's not part of this request, but we felt it important to go ahead and show that this was part of the overall plan. The school would be proposed to go in the current Cigna building, which is in the blue, which there is at the roundabout that you see on Goodwin Road. Next slide, please. This gives you an overall, taking the zoning off and then showing what the uses are. So if you look at that light green to the right, again, everything is single family in there. You then have sort of a darker, sort of grayish blue, and then a lighter blue, which is where Brian has his hand. That's row housing, but again, single family. Then to the left of the hand and straight up in that sort of C-shaped building, that is senior housing. To the left again is the apartments. And then you'll see the Cigna building, which is existing in the parking lot below. That would again be looking at going towards the school. Next slide. This just gives you a blow up. Again, the apartments that are shown up there that would connect off of Commons Boulevard as well as the back access behind Lowe's. Next. This shows you just some of the type apartment buildings that the developer Empire has done on other developments in the past. I think you see that's a nice quality, good look. Next. That shows you sort of a frontal elevation of what anticipated at this particular juncture. This is proposed assisted living, again, the C-shaped building, 2 access points to Common Boulevard. Next. So this shows the residential component as it backs up in to Drake Forest. Now, what we did propose adjoining Drake Forest is to put in a 10-foot type C landscape buffer, understanding that we're going from residential, abutting residential. And as a normal rule, we don't require landscape buffers, but we understand that this is certainly going to be a change for people that are used to seeing woods. So we put in a 10-foot type C landscape buffer running along the perimeter in through that area. And then I also showed the existing houses on that slide as they relate in proximity to what we're doing. Now, I would point out that their setback on their side is 25 feet. Our setback on our side will be 25 feet. So there's a minimum of 50 feet between structures with, again, a 10-foot landscape buffer located between the two. Next slide, please. This shows you sort of the row houses, which again is that portion that is more to the interior. We look at these being more estate homes that would be constructed here, again, abutting next to Drake Forest. Next. This shows you some of the other types of development that Empire has done. So you can see, again, nice looks, modern building materials, just very, very quality type development. Next. We do plan on green space and amenities, connectivity, again, if we can work this through with the school system as we go through that process. So again, people, places to do, be around, enjoy. That's part of what is our goal to accomplish here in the development. Next. Some more slides of the same. Other developments, and that pretty well gives the indication of what we're looking at doing. So if I have any time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reserve that to the end to address any comments that we have from opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. How much time does he have left? 2 minutes, 47 seconds, Mr. Price. We'll hear from the opposition. If you could, if you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, go ahead and come on up to the mic.
Mr. Chairman, while they're coming up, I did receive an email, showed some pictures of some adjacent homes.
Yeah.
I was not able to download those. It wouldn't let me share but one picture, so I didn't put them in here, but we did receive some email opposition from Mr. Lloyd with pictures.
Okay. So total time for opposition is 9 minutes. I think there's a gentleman that is behind you that wants to speak as well. And state your name and address for the record.
William Lloyd, 2020 Galahad Road, Chattanooga. And as a precursor, I did send the email, but receiving something on an email these days is one thing. Seeing a live person can be another thing. And so I thought it was important to be here in person. I am a resident of Drake Forest, which abuts the property in question here on the east. I live on Galahad Road. Drake, it's interesting to me that we're talking about this project, which is nice, it's beautiful and all that, but we're talking very clinically without any recognition to what happened to Drake Forest. Drake Forest took significant destruction from the tornado of Easter 2020, especially the Galahad Road, Peterson Drive, Camelot Lane sections, which border the proposed R1 section of this project. 2 years later, our neighborhood is nowhere near rebuilt. It could take another several years before our neighborhood is fully restored. Those of us who had our homes fully destroyed and have managed to rebuild on Galahad and Peterson were displaced for the better part of the past 2 years, working to rebuild our homes and return to some kind of normalcy. We still are reminded every day of the devastation from that event. Many vacant lots where large homes once stood, especially on the Galahad-Peterson immediate border with the property. Houses are still being built painstakingly, I might add. There's still a little bit of debris in vacant lots and even in the trees from that storm, and streets that have continued to be pounded and are almost undrivable in sections. This project proposes further destruction of the neighborhood through the complete deforestation of the property. This has been a natural boundary for Drake Forest for decades. It is fully understood that the property in question is privately owned. However, in the world outside of Chattanooga, Hamilton County, massive projects such as this would generate serious discussion on the impact to adjoining neighborhoods. Many municipalities require either preservation of some part of the existing landscape, creation of greenways or parks as a purposeful transition and separation from existing neighborhoods, and that benefits both the existing and new neighborhoods. In this application, there is no indication of any concern for the neighbors in Drake Forest. The staff report is very clinical and doesn't even mention anything. The project with the R1 proposes has a very minimal to no buffer between Drake Forest and the project property. The lot sizes, even though we hear about 10 foot in the setbacks, the real question is the lot sizes of the proposed project are much smaller than the Drake Forest properties, with almost 2 or more project lots for every 1 Drake Forest lot, again, with very minimal separation. We are concerned about the marketability of properties on that corridor that are yet to be rebuilt with that kind of deforestation, construction, and lack of buffer. The kind of encroachment the project projects is not unusual for Drake Forest. Previous zoning has allowed large 3-story apartment buildings to be built up to the property lines of neighbors on Peterson Drive, as well as the Ashford Tiny Village to be built up to property lines further down Peterson. With the project, some properties on Peterson will actually have in their backyards a 3-story apartment building and a home. It's hard to imagine that anyone other than the folks who are subject to this in Drake Forest would really appreciate or tolerate that kind of encroachment on their residents. The other issue is water. The staff report talks about that part of the property is a wetland, but I can tell you that part of Drake Forest is wet. And so there's no mention about what happens with this project as it's built up to the residents of Drake Forest and our water issues. Anyone that tries to build on our side at Galahad and Peterson, trying to build there, water mitigation, water drainage is a major concern for each one of those properties. What's going to happen once this massive project is built, and what happens to our neighborhood as we're still trying to recover from a horrific event. And finally, public safety. I can tell you that having gone through the tornado and the destruction that storm levied on our neighborhood, it was hours before public safety personnel could get to us. And they got to us on foot because it was impassable. And there are medically fragile people within our neighborhood. And it is a blessing that nobody had a serious medical event because they could not have been evacuated. And so we're in an area where, aside from Gun Barrel and a widened Shallowford, Jenkins Road, Igu Gap, Goodwin Road, those are all 2-lane, basically rural roads that were not designed for the kind of development that's being proposed here. And so I would hope that there would be a thought to, God forbid we don't have another incident like that, but with this massive number, potentially thousands of people that could come into this development, how does public safety deal in the event of a mass event or a natural disaster? I would hope that.
Sir, I want to make sure that I leave enough time for the gentleman who's standing behind you, but he's giving you the go ahead to keep going. So you're going to.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, that's fine.
And I apologize for taking the time.
No, it's quite all right. I just wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to hear from him.
It's one thing to look at great developments. It's another thing to think about the people that will be impacted, and especially people and neighbors that have already been impacted in a very serious way. And I hope the council will think about that as they contemplate this project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Council. Sorry, I think he did a great job explaining a lot of things, and we did kind of discuss before we came here. Before he came here, I told him that I may not be able to make it, but all that I want to say is this: emphasize the fact is that we went through a tornado in 2020. It's been 2 years since most people who have had their homes destroyed were able to build back up. But our neighborhood is, if you go through Galahad Road, it looks like a third world country. I'm not kidding you, because I come from a third world country. I'm a first generation immigrant. But when I ride through that roads, it's so horrible. And what brings that in? There's water flowing from all different sides, from those sides of the road into our roads. We don't have proper drainage systems. We've been promised that this would be taken care of, but things are not taken care of. When I look at it, development is good. I mean, we really love development, but the main thing is what is in for us. We are always the forgotten people there. Whereas development is going on everywhere else. Everyone else is getting the best of best. Well, we are just left behind to take in all the crap that's been left behind by the rest of them. So that's what we as residents there needed. I mean, I think we speak for the Drake Forest residents. We have quite a number of them, and I would hope that there's something that you guys could do for us in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could address just a couple things before Mr. Price takes the microphone. The gentleman sitting to my right, Mayor Kelly, actually went to bat for Drake Forest, and after many years of being neglected, Drake Forest. And we spoke about Drake Forest. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of those roads you just mentioned are being rebuilt and repaved this year. Well, we just started the paving season. So, and we're working through it. It's not a magic wand. It is a process. And I've been in communication with Mr. Lloyd about specific repairs, and Public Works has responded. So when we say forgotten, I'm going to have to take a couple steps back on that. We haven't been forgotten. The mayor put forth in his budget last year tremendous amounts of attention to Drake Forest. And I applaud him for doing that. And I wholeheartedly supported his budget in doing that. And as we move forward, there are other roads in Drake Forest that I have seen on the list as well. So you're not forgotten. The tornado recovery is a time lengthy process. I understand that. Some people have more resources than others. Some have wrestled with insurance. Some have died. Some parents have left properties that people don't know what to do with. Drake Forest is kind of loosely organized and does not have the power to assist in other areas to help move things along. So, I mean, I want to make sure you understand that you're not forgotten or treated like a third world country. I kind of take a couple steps back at that. I think that's inappropriate to say, number one. When we talk about land use, when we talk about stormwater, those are things that are going to come down at the permitting level. And if you have a large area of land that is unchecked, uncontrolled, and comes under the guidelines of TDEC and the City of Chattanooga stormwater regulations, that is going to not only manage water flow from that property affecting Drake Forest, I would argue, and I've seen it, thousands of cases, it will help because you will have a managed system that is put into place. When it comes to access, access was provided in the form of an ask to Drake Forest to have access outside of just the two entrances hitting Shallowford Road, and it was adamantly denied. An access to Goodwin Road to come in. So when we say access, it was told to me in a meeting, you did not want access. You did not want people coming through your neighborhood. And so I humbly respected that request, and I dropped the issue of another access point into Drake Forest because I understand I live in that type of neighborhood too. So I want to make sure when we use these types of conversation pieces against something that people understand the full picture. And I think that's important to note. So I'll stop there and let Mr. Price finish his points.
Mr. Price,
Thank you. So
you've got 4 minutes and 43 seconds.
I'm going to try to use less than that.
There you go.
So again, Empire Communities has certainly taken an approach here to look at the overall holistic development and try to figure out what is the proper and respectful way to do that. And I think we've accomplished that by the fact, again, that we planted or proposed to plant a 10-foot landscape buffers, which is an evergreen tree planted at 10 feet on centers. And any of you that have seen these planted, given it 2, 3, 4 years, you get pretty much an effective screen that is as good as and effective in terms of blocking your visual viewpoints from your neighbor as there is, as it relates to landscaping in through there. We, in our neighborhood meeting, talked about the fact that we would be happy if the residents of Drake Forest, if they wanted to give us a list of the type of evergreen trees to plant, we would do that. So we're not hardened by the fact that we just want to plant a row of trees to be done. We'll work with the community as it relates to that. But when you look at the overall use of the land and what it is today, this is a down zoning at the end of the day when you boil it all down next to Drake Forest. You could put a parking lot within 10 feet of these residents. So given what we're doing single family, we're 2 stories in height. We're certainly putting in, I think, an appropriate use and meets the housing crisis and needs. And Empire Communities would humbly ask that this plan be approved as presented. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Before you take any questions, I wanted to make sure we cover these conditions one more time, just so that it's fresh on everybody's mind. There are a number of conditions, and the applicant's okay with all those conditions?
The 2 conditions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any questions?
All heads.
Mr. Payne.
I'll yield.
Okay, Mr. Payne, and then Chairman Ledford, Mr. Maybe.
Well, I was just going to say, I certainly have empathy for the people that have been through the tornado and all that they've dealt with. But I would say, as far as the thoughtfulness of this plan, the fact that you backed R1 up to R1, looked like your apartments or your more dense housing backed up to existing apartment buildings. I mean, it seems to me a very thoughtful plan. And I also want to say, some of the idea that you can take, Drake Forest has been there for 40 or 50 years, something along those lines. And what the market wanted and what people wanted in R1 housing is not the same as today. I mean, it's not just a matter of, trying to get more lots in it. The market doesn't particularly want 3/4 acre lots. Lifestyles have changed. People don't want to be mowing grass, et cetera. So in my mind, it's a very thoughtful plan. It is taking a lot of consideration toward the neighbors. And when it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion, but I will let someone else talk if they need to.
Chairman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, I want to make sure we have a couple of things clear. Number one, as it is zoned now, we could have parking lots, lighted parking lots, and access roads 10 feet off of the back of Drake Forest properties under the current condition as it isn't right now in 01.
That is correct.
So that's important to me because what I heard just a minute ago was 3-story apartments overlooking folks on Peterson, and that concerns me. I was not in office when those apartments were zoned or built, and I agree 100%. I would not want to see that, just like I would not want to see a plan come to us. Well, under 01, they can do it without coming to us. That's the ace, I guess, if you will, and build 6- and 7-story office complex with lighted parking. I mean, I cannot imagine the impact on Drake Forest.
Even
that
to
would have.
To that point, yes, or even 2- and 3-story buildings, which is probably what would still overwhelm and outmass Drake Forest as I would see it.
So I want to make sure that is really clear because that concerns me the most of what can be done right now without anybody's permission, just pulling an LDP, and that's concerning. So I want to make sure R1 to R1 does not require a landscape buffer, but you're adding in a 10-foot and the choice of trees. We talked about that at the meeting. And we'll talk about that further when we get to council, because I want to make sure Drake Forest has that ability in writing.
Sure.
And any other minor concerns that come up. But I think overall, that's the comments I have for this afternoon. But I was going to make a motion, but I will defer to Commissioner Payne.
We do have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Mr. Maybe, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That Chairman Ledford covered my thoughts.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Price. The next case is item 22 on our agenda. Same address, same project, and this is recommended for approval for special permit for residential plan unit development. We've heard from opposition, we've heard from the applicant and staff. Is there any questions for staff or the applicant?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Need a second. And it has been seconded. Mr. Lehman, did you want to say something?
I just noticed that there was is that correct, a condition on the HUD?
That is correct. We have one condition on the PUD plan that labels roads A and B, which is pretty much the main spine of this development. We recommend that be platted as a public road, just to confirm that that will be. It was not indicated private. We'll just make sure that's shown as public.
Yep, the applicant has indicated they're fine with that condition. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you.
Item 23 on our agenda is case 2022-0149, and it's located at 12,000 Judd Road, and it's an application to rezone M1 to C3, and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And do you have any questions or comments in regards to the conditions? You do. Mr. Schultz?
Mr. Chairman, you want me to go through the presentation or just go straight to the conditions?
Do you mind if we hear from Ms. Shepherd first?
Yeah, I'll throw the conditions up. What I have on the screen, let me get to them here. There's several conditions.
It's sometimes helpful if we know where their
Right.
point of contention is.
And I have it on the screen if she wants to go through these screens. I took out what they want to remove and the changes in red.
That's helpful. Mrs. Shepherd?
Donna Shepherd with AD Engineering. We are requesting a down zone from an M1 manufacturing to a C3 with conditions. As you can see up on the screen, we've got the conditions. I think it would be appropriate to give a little bit of background on the property and also look at our districts that we're proposing. So if you wouldn't mind going to the site plan. There you go. This property is the former Central Soya ADM soybean processing facility. The total acreage is approximately 70 acres, and we are rezoning 59 acres to C3, and then 11 will remain M1 along the river. There are existing barge cells and dolphins on the river, and so that is the reason why we are leaving that M1. This is a brownfield redevelopment project. Before this property actually remained vacant for over 18 years. It is in the River to Ridge plan. The plan did have it staying manufacturing, but I don't think anybody anticipated it going to a mixed use development, much like what's happening on Manufacturer Road and in the Bend. At one time, there were 38 concrete silos in excess of 150 feet and 2 large bean bowls, hence the name bean bowl, structures over 100 feet tall. And so what we're proposing is 3 different districts. If you'll stay on that plan, please. The one up front, I'd rather go to the district plan, please. There you go. The one up front is District A, and we have conditions proposed on that. You can see a 200-foot line, And so as we transition into C, which also would allow commercial and residential development, we are providing somewhat of a buffer for certain prohibited uses. And then section B is going to be all residential. We've shown a network system of roads. These are our major roads. All of them will be public roads except for the one that runs through A. Go to the right, yes. So with that, I think I will go through the conditions. We've already done a traffic impact study for this site, and any condition warrants having a traffic signal at this location at Judd Road. The Riverwalk, the existing Riverwalk does go through this property on the east side towards Amnicola. So there's already Riverwalk connectivity through there. Judd Road is surrounded primarily by manufacturing uses to the north and then to the south side. So there you go. You can see the bean bowls there. Those are the two round large silos. Going through the conditions, they wanted to put a restriction and prohibit assisted living in all zones, and we'd like to keep that use. Assisted living has a lengthy process to be approved. It has to have a special permit through Board of Zoning Appeals. So at such time, if we decide to have an assisted living facility, we feel like that there's some additional steps that we'll go through. District A, I'm not going to read through all of the prohibited uses. The major point to take in is that we will have commercial and residential. And I had mentioned there were some additional uses that were prohibited within 200 feet of Zone C. District B is going to be residential only, and then District C would be commercial and residential uses. We are looking to provide multiple different types of housing in our residential plan. And that diverse housing type would be single family, detached, attached, townhomes, multi-story, multi-family buildings, and then mixed use buildings. And those would be in A and C for mixed use. B is all residential. One of the conditions for condition number 2 was for a landscape buffer. RPA recommended that there would be a 30-foot landscape screen along the northern, southern, and eastern property lines. If you'll go back to the site plan, on the south side, there's a large drainage swale that runs along the property line that carries quite a bit of drainage through there. And then looking on the aerial, there's already a large landscape area towards the river to the where it says vacant future industrial site. There's a railroad track that runs through there, and then that site's vacant, but there is a heavily wooded buffer already there. If you look to the landscape code, C3 only requires a buffer next to a residential zone. In the screening matrix, M1 to commercial is a type C screen. So the onus is on the industrial zone to screen against the commercial and the residential. And then for any residential areas, the manufacturer would be required to provide a 30-foot landscape screen. So what we feel is if we would like to provide some screening for our residents and for our development, that we would do that at the permitting process and at our discretion. Let's see, going back to the zoning conditions. For setbacks, number A, up there, they had recommended 3 stories. You know, going through recent zoning cases that people are building 3 stories, often like rooftop decks. C3 has a cap on 4 stories right now. And so we revised that to 4 stories. So everything reads the same on that. So this would be for new multifamily buildings, 4 stories height or greater, non-residential buildings that would require a 0 setback with the street edge. For units less than 4 stories, again, we changed that from 3 to 4. There would be no setback or street edge requirements.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, before we move on to the next slide, I want to clarify a little bit what Ms. Shepherd's stating here. On those 3 building story of 3 stories, that's a C3 standard. It wasn't a condition we proposed. Basically, these conditions were coming from the C3 standards and incorporated into as conditions. So that's a tweak to a standard.
So is that actually even legal?
We're doing, that's why the request is going from C3 to C3 with conditions. We're taking, later on the agenda, we're talking about a work session we're having in a couple weeks to amend the C3 to have those deviations, if you will, removed. Go back the way we used to do it with conditions. So in this case, we knew that was coming up. We took what were the C3 standards, which were conditions back in the day, and just incorporating into this.
And it was the applicant's request to be rezoned to C3, not we suggested other things, PUD, whatever. And yes, the council can approve C3 with conditions.
That's correct. So that building height of 3 stories is not a condition coming from staff. That was a carryover from the C3 standards.
Gotcha.
Just clarify for record.
Well, for further clarification, we did submit our application for a C3 zone and for a deviation request, which is currently allowed in 15A prior to any changes in the zoning code. And so
Hold on one second. Chairman Ludford.
Just a quick question for staff. Is this in the UO or OZ? Or both?
It's in the opportunity zone.
Okay, thank you.
So we did submit that prior to, and so in order to work with them in this transition period, we have kind of transitioned to a condition-based zoning as opposed to what we've seen recently in C3 cases for rezoning. Number C, they had requested that we provide a minimum 30-foot easement along the river for the continuation of the Riverwalk, which isn't applicable to this site. The Riverwalk already traverses across the front of the property, and that portion of the property is not within the requested rezone. Height requirements, we pretty much came to stay the same. We just revised it and added mixed use just for clarity. And so we are requesting additional heights to be 6 stories in District A and C. And then for number C, the maximum height of new non-residential multifamily or mixed use buildings in District B would remain at 4 stories. The maximum height of all residential buildings, and this is so we've defined multi-family buildings in the previous 2 conditions. So this would be more like a townhome, a single family attached. The maximum height would be 4 stories, which is in keeping with the setbacks language that we had. For number 5, this is access to the building. Because Judd Road is a shared road with the surrounding industrial area, one of the things in C3 was addressing the primary street. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a problem when we got to the land disturbance portion of our project and say that we had to address the front of our buildings to Judd Road, because it might be more appropriate for that to be the rear of the development where you have parking lots and loading as such. If I'm short on time, let me know.
There's just a little bit of time left.
Okay. Off-street parking, we did make a change to B. We wanted to follow the current landscape code language in 38.594. Street frontage, we didn't make any changes. The only thing that I added was for utility screens. We've had some interpretation on another project where we had problems with that. So you might have a transformer or something that is located to the rear of the building, but we want to be able to make that wall taller and not just 4 feet tall. Structured parking will be allowed on the ground floor. It will be screened like a parking lot for a parking lot edge. The only other thing that we removed was security type roll-up doors. for example, when you're on Cherry Street, you've got some apartments and you've got roll-up doors for secured parking. We wanted to have the ability to do that. And then also along Judd Road, so you have a commercial business that has loading area in the back. On the dumpsters, we added or side. So that quickly goes through the changes in the conditions, and I will entertain any questions.
Thank you. I asked earlier, I just wanted to double check. Is there any opposition to this zoning case?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive an email last week from, I think her name was Lynn Mansfield with the Hamilton County Industrial. What's Lynn's, Todd? I can't remember.
She's our real property.
Real property. She'd had some conversations with the people who own this vacant property to the south. She didn't know if they were going to be here today, but they did have concerns. They're under contract to put some type of asphalt emulsions plant here. And my understanding for that email was they're going to heavily use this railroad track. They had concerns about putting residential next to their future industrial plant. I guess they're not here, but just want to make that as part of the record.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I asked him to ask again just to make sure nobody shut up. But just to that point, and I guess, can I ask a staff question? 'Cause
Sure.
I want to clarify, I think something Ms. Shepherd said. So yes, that is currently under contract, and Hamilton County does own the industrial park to the south. Let me clarify something. If you have an M1 property and the property around you is M1 and somebody rezones that, does that onus for the buffer fall back on the existing M1, or is that pushed to the new M1? Because
that was our thoughts behind putting the landscape buffer, was because, this property next door is already M1. They would not be required to put landscaping in unless they make improvements or expansion. We were putting the buffer in to help protect the residential as they're being constructed.
Well, let me ask a question. Let me clarify what you just said, because I don't know what the city code or the city requirement is for development. But if someone comes in and develops the M1 to the south, and someone has rezoned or is recently rezoned, does that put the onus for a 30-foot buffer on?
It would on the M1.
Well, then.
And I will say, just to add something, when I was talking to Ms. Mansfield on that use, the M1 zone has also a distance requirement for certain types of industrial uses. It cannot be within 1,000 feet of any residential use. We reached out to codes enforcement to see if this use would classify as that 1,000-foot buffer distance. Without talking to that future user, it was not clear in his mind if that would kick in or not. Okay.
Could I say something really quick? Mr. Lehman, if you'll notice, Norfolk Southern has a right-of-way in between there. And so typically when you have a right-of-way, a public right-of-way in between properties, that's a separation for screening requirements. And so I think that would take that onus off of the M1 property adjacent to it. And also, Zone A is slated to be a mixed use. And so certainly that could be commercial, in which case if you were to have to screen, which I don't think you would have to because of the Norfolk Southern right of way, it would only be a 10-foot screen.
Thank you.
Just speak one second. Scott Williams with Fletcher Bright Company. I'm actually with Beanbowl LLC. So part of what's going on to the south of the railroad is a clean medical tubing facility that just went in, part of the development. The landscape portion of it will be addressed in the planning stage on the residential side, depending on what needs to be addressed by the individual homeowners and the location on the development, and don't want to have just a blanket landscape easement or requirement over the whole site. So.
Thank you. So, Mr. Schultz, I do have a question for you. So if you go back to these conditions, it seems like this is an incredibly complex system of conditions, and then the applicant requesting for very, very specific, changes to those conditions.
You may remember.
And then we don't truly have a staff recommendation on the applicant's request for changes to those conditions.
No, we don't.
I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire planning commission, but, and I know the applicant, I don't know the applicant, but I know their representative here, and I'm sure they're more than capable. But it feels like we're really not set up for success as a planning commission in regards to this case and the complexity of it and the lack of a staff recommendation on those specific items, or maybe not. And I don't put that back on y'all entirely, but it
So
seems
again,
like.
I'll let Dan.
Well, Brian, please help. So this property requested to be C3, which we are actively amending that district. We did suggest other approaches. C3 normally, is our downtown urban district before the form-based code. And so the standards that we used as conditions were from the C3 standards in the ordinance. They are asking to change those with some specific items, to go 4 stories and other things. And I think we have to recognize this is not downtown. This is a standalone site where we're trying to use C3 to meet the goals of what this particular applicant's desires are for what they think is this future development. So we're trying to amend, what was a former zoning district, that'll probably go away in the next year under our zoning update. So there's a couple of things going on here. And in addition to that, obviously this is an unusual site. Fronting the river, fronting Chicken Creek, some active industrial close by. It's an unusual site, unusual zoning case. And I think what they're trying to do is, from their standpoint, they think this is the zoning and the standards that they need to be successful. I think we're just trying to work with.
I hear you, but am I right in saying we do not currently have a staff recommendation
No, that's correct.
in regards to their specific variances to specific conditions?
That's correct. We probably
so
just had that conversation with them Friday.
The code
So
says 3 stories. They're asking for 4. Planning Commission is currently, at the moment, right now, being asked to make a decision on 3 or 4 stories without a staff recommendation.
We have a recommendation based on
History,
not
this specific site or this specific applicant.
or the amendments, like Dan said, we just met with them on Friday morning to get the revised, what were standards.
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Yes.
In
Keep it brief.
fairness to the application, and I mentioned this earlier, we submitted prior to any zoning in a public forum for C3, we submitted 2 applications. We submitted a C3 application and we submitted a deviations application. And so under 15A, we are allowed to request deviations to the C3 code upon merit. They did not accept our application or our check for the deviation. And it wasn't until Friday when we got the staff report, or Tuesday, whenever it was, that we learned that they were going to this format. We thought that what we would have would be 2 separate cases, one for the C3 zone and one with our requested deviations. So when we got the conditions from the staff report, we went through them and we felt that we had the opportunity to make minor tweaks to them if we were going to be held to specific conditions on this case. So I would like to request that we move forward to city council with this case, because we submitted it under the current code of C3 and then also an application for deviations.
But to be clear, your request is that Planning Commission approve C3 with all of your modified conditions.
Yes, sir.
As conditions that would go to city council. Is what I just want to clarify that. We do not currently have, yet we are actively changing the deviation process. And we've been advised by our attorneys and other attorneys that we do not need to continue that any future, that the city council is completely legal, can make all kind. Conditional zoning is permitted under state law with the city of Chattanooga. They can make conditions. That's the process where our attorneys are recommending we go forward on this one and every other C3 with condition case. So it's not unusual with this one. They just happen to have had in their intent 2 or 3 months ago to do it this process, and it changed. And we told them that when they came in, and they wanted to go forward.
I got a question.
Mr. Payne.
I need to I'm trying to understand. I think it's something that was brought up, but I'm not sure I understand it. The property owners next, the M1 property, we're talking about an asphalt plant coming in. If we change this, it's incumbent upon them now to up their landscape buffer. Is that right or wrong?
That's my understanding, because the M1 is vacant now, and abutting that would be C3 with residential. So when that manufacturing plant comes in,
That almost seems like a taking to me in a way.
I would disagree that you have a railroad right of way, which is a public right of way that separates that. So that's been my understanding in doing development, that whenever you have a public right of way in Norfolk Southern in between, that is a separation of properties, so that screening is not required anymore. So if you go to the southern side, you don't have that. But yes, there's already that. We're talking about the parcel that's not developed yet. There's already a screen. As he mentioned, there is a clean tubing facility that's already in that facility already.
I just feel like if you wanted to put the maximum zoning on the piece being developed rather than the other piece, then I would understand. But I don't see encumbering, that's right now M1 to M1, and I'm all for housing for sure. I think we have a housing crisis, but I also think we have industrial site problem as well. So, if we can figure out a way to accommodate both, okay.
Well,
Right here.
just Mr. Lehman.
No, I mean, and I brought it up because I agree completely with Mr. Payne relative to future development of that site. Initially, you do have a Norfolk Southern Railroad, but it would be a cleared line. And so I think there was some concern with maybe not knowing exactly relative to a requirement that may push to the south for a planted buffer or a separation buffer. To Ms. Shepherd's point, I have no idea whether an active Norfolk Southern line meets that requirement or not. I can understand in certain roadway conditions it potentially will. I don't know if anybody knows the answer. I'm not over at LDO. I don't think Mr. Schultz knows. He also brought up another issue relative to 1,000 feet, which I had not heard. But I think anything that changes on this site that would maybe impact the development of an existing site that's actually currently in the works. So I'm not sure what the timeline is, but I'd like to have some more answers before I'm willing to support something like this, and maybe a deferral's in order.
Mr. Schultz, can you go back to the first condition that there's some sort of difference in opinion on? So normal C3 conditions say assisted living shall be prohibited.
No, let me go clarify. There were 3 conditions that we as staff added. One was this one here: assisted living facilities shall be prohibited in all districts. Our concern here was you got to actively.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Go to the next slide.
Next one is this buffer.
Okay, so then let's just talk about multifamily buildings. No, on that previous slide. The standard C3 condition is 3 stories.
Correct.
Okay. The applicant wants 4 stories.
Correct.
Did staff know that the applicant wanted 4 stories? And does staff have a recommendation on whether or not we should approve 4 stories or 3 stories?
We met with them on Friday morning.
Okay. And then that question, if I were to repeat it on every single one of these red lines, the answer would be no. We met with them on Friday morning.
Correct.
Okay. And I understand from Mrs. Shepherd that there are some changes and some pretty significant challenges with the fact that C3 is in the process of being changed. And so with all that being said, I feel like we do not have a staff recommendation on this. Is that
We
fair?
did.
Not on these conditions. We do have a staff recommendation on the C3 standards that we're carrying over with
Right.
these 3 additionals.
Let me, I mean,
Mr. Chair, so on.
No.
just to be clear, again, this is an unusual site,
Sure.
big site. It's not downtown Chattanooga. I think 4-story buildings and 6-story buildings on this site is something that might make complete sense. I mean, this
Sure.
is a raw land site. It's a budding, these, and to the applicants' credit, they're saying, look, we're not going to be able to sell these wonderful 4 and potentially 6-story buildings if we do it in a poor manner. They have every intent to do a good project, I think. The question of 4 to 6 stories, I think, is one that we're just going to be, I'm sure we're going to be almost agnostic about it. I think we're going to be perfectly fine with it being 4 stories. Versus 3, I think they intend to build single family homes that's probably going to be tall 4-story type buildings.
Okay.
So I don't think there's I don't think on some of these things, the assisted living, I think when we spoke with them Friday, I kind of get that this might be a great site for assisted living. Our concern was if you had a blocked road, the railroad's just the wild card here.
I understand. Mr. Farmer.
On whether we requested the 4 stories or not. We requested going from 3 stories to 4 stories, having that delineating line on the setbacks. In our original deviation application that we submitted to them, and then we resubmitted a new application when they didn't accept our deviation application, we requested 4 stories in B and 6 stories in A and C.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to be efficient. Whether or not it's 3 stories or 4 stories is not my point. My point was as simple as what I would like to have, we don't have, which is a staff recommendation in regards to the conditions that the applicant is requesting. And we don't currently have that, and I understand why we don't have that, but that was my only point. Mr. Farmer.
Yeah, listen, as a matter of process, I hear you. I hear you. I've had similar frustrations. I get it. I hear you. I spent enough time up here where I know about how this might go. What I'm saying is for, I think, the better of your project and to get the best recommendation we can to move forward, would you take 30 days and meet with the staff? Would you take 30 days and hear this again next month and meet with the staff so we can have a better recommendation, so we can have an appropriate staff recommendation to make our decision on?
I want to make sure that we're vested in the C3. And so with all of the changes that are rescinding the code, I want to make sure that we don't lose our application for C3.
That's a super fair statement. I'd love to hear the answer to that.
Is it actually on our agenda today to rescind the C3?
No, but
Okay, just discussion of the fact that that's coming. Okay. Mr. Maybe.
I guess this is a question for staff. I'm just looking for a little clarification on since it's currently the way the code works, why the request for their deviation was not accepted.
So we are accepting their application to amend the C3 with conditions. We're just not going to call it deviations, and they will go to city council. Deviations had the intent that it was something planning commission would sign off on. And we've been advised that any changes to height and other things that are typical zoning requirements would have to go to council. And so city council can make conditions at their will. So it absolutely will, and we, support doing it in that manner. I think the only question that's on the table is, did they ask for 4 or 6 stories in their initial application? And I, again, would have to defer to.
I can answer that. Here, they did ask for deviations. That's correct. And they're on the screen. Those deviations to the staff recommendation were to approve the C3 with conditions, which was their deviation request. They're on the screen here. Now, those old C3 standards that were just carried over standards. That's where the applicant started tweaking those standards as conditions.
Right.
So yes, we did take the deviation, but it wasn't called a deviation. It's called a condition. They're on the screen highlighted in red.
So
Staff
I
agreed with
guess where
those.
I'm getting to is it sounds like they caught it at a bad time is what you're saying, is that y'all have gotten a legal opinion that says we shouldn't do it the way we've been doing it. But we haven't taken any action as a planning commission or a city council to change those rules. So you're saying this is the best option we can give them?
And then we, just so you know, before, when we had that sit down with them to talk about their application, we advised that they do a PUD or which would have done exactly the same thing as what we're talking about. They just did not want to have to risk that they would have to come back and amend their PUD at some future date.
But Mr. Chair, Mr. Farmer, just one more quick point. It's tough spot for the applicant, tough spot for staff there. If I have, I guess my primary concern, and this is again no fault of the applicant, is the issue with the potential impact on the industrial piece to the north. And that I believe is something that goes beyond this case and that we probably need to discuss as a body and how it could impact future rezonings. But having said that, I'll
Mr. Farmer.
I wonder if staff could answer this. If the applicant was to take a 30-day deferral, what does that look like between staff and an applicant for what we would expect? What would you expect that we would see differently? And I think with respect to they want to stay C3.
I don't think we're far apart at all on this. I think it's just a matter of process and communication and other things. I think it'll be cleaner if you would want to do that. But I think if you'll want to recommend approval of it and it can be addressed in the upcoming weeks before council, I think that's fine too.
Mr. Lehman.
Yeah, and let me make this comment because I don't think I like the development. I mean, I sort of think it's a really neat development from a land use perspective. I think my concern is representing the property just to the south that's currently under contract to develop, and whatever would jeopardize that. I mean, if it was already sold and under construction and they had a permit to build the manufacturing facility that site was developed by Hamilton County government to do, I think it's different. So it may be as much of a timing issue as anything, but currently, and whatever the will of the commission is, I think we've got some things that would put me on pause. I will not vote as a recommendation in its current form without some additional information. And then I think probably the county will, if we get some additional information that would adversely impact development of that south side to the south, I think we would be either here next month. If there's a 30-day deferral, we would be at city council. Thank you.
Mr. Farmer.
I've kind of pushed the applicant for a 30-day extension. I'd love to hear what they think about it.
The one that you're talking about, we'll give you the 30-foot landscape buffer.
We don't know that even fixes anything. That's the problem. Because it doesn't mean that it's still not required on the M1 property.
They're gonna let you. He's actually made it. Okay, go ahead.
Just so everybody knows, we've been working on the site since 2017. We've been actively under demolition on this piece of property for 2.5 years. I've taken down a 165-foot structure that stood for 18 years vacant. We've got 100 million pounds of concrete crushed on site ready for reuse. We've tried to do all the right things. We've talked to everybody previously about the C3. I think C3 has been a transformative zoning zone for other projects. And that's why we want to continue to hold the C3 issue. The asphalt emulsion plant, when it came out in the paper, the first call I made was, how's that going to affect our development? And the answer was it's enclosed and encapsulated facilities that won't put off any odor or cause any problems. That railroad track is active about 2 times a day. They don't want to block Amnicola Road. Our traffic study is taking into account that. We've met with, all the public safety people too. I understand the concern with that, and we're trying to do the right thing to address a piece of property that we feel like, quite frankly, is a diamond in the rough. It's been out there for a long time. It has access to the Riverwalk. We have access to the Chickamauga Greenway, and we're 4 miles from downtown. And the reason we asked for assisted living to be allowed is we're close to the hospitals, and who knows what's going to happen in another 8, 10, 12, 15 years. I may need to be in assisted living. I'd like to live down on the river at some point. So anyway.
If I may, just here's what I would like to have. I'd like to have a motion to approve with the changes that the applicant has requested between, and one added condition that between now and city council, staff have a recommendation on all of the differences between the applicant's requests for specific conditions and the standard conditions. And so what that would look like is under setbacks, it would say, standard condition 3 stories, applicants requesting 4 stories, staff recommending approve. Applicant has requested to add primary here, staff is recommending deny, or whatever those things are, that staff would recommend approval or denial on all those things so that city council can weigh the differences between what the applicant is requesting and staff. So I'd like to have a motion like that, Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to make that motion. I think as the staff had indicated, I think y'all are close with the staff. I really do. I think it's just a matter of having the time to do it. So I'm optimistic y'all could get that done for the council meeting. I still come back to the point on how it will impact that industrial piece. I would ask the staff kind of get some clarification on that before it gets to council. And Chairman Ledford, I assume that would be something y'all would take into consideration.
I think Mrs. Shepherd is correct.
Okay.
That if there's a railroad there, that is considered a right of way, and there's no buffering when there's a right of way separation.
Yeah, I believe that to be the case too.
Right, and that needs to happen between now and council.
And-
But clearly, I mean, it's a big deal that this happened today. We don't know why. It sounds like it would be to the benefit of everybody to
So
move it along.
So moved as you previously stated.
Does the minute taker know what that motion was?
You were
Okay.
on the same page, right?
All right. We do have a motion. And it has been seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, the county commission voted to allow this emulsification plant to come in, and I am still not really concerned. I'm concerned about how that's going to affect that business that we've already approved. And I'm not sure that I've got a clear answer on that. And while it won't come before county commission, it will go before city council. But I am concerned that it's something that does affect. Should I abstain on that? Because I feel like I would like to know more how it's going to affect our what we've already approved with the county commission.
Sure.
So I would rather see a deferral, but I'll abstain from voting yes for it. It may be good, but I wish we had time to get staff to let us know a few more details. Thank you.
Is it possible your motion to be the information that you requested come back here 30 days from now? I mean, is that possible?
It sounds like it's not. I mean, I've never heard this kind of discussion. An applicant refused to ask for a deferral, knowing that it could go down. So I don't know why they're refusing a 30-day deferral, but they are.
Yeah. I mean, do you understand where this is?
We don't know what those pressures are, but.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the applicant a quick question?
Yeah. Mr. Maybe.
Would y'all rather see it get denied possibly today and continue to move on instead of it being deferred? You take the risk of it being denied today. Either because if it gets denied, it still goes to council, right?
Yes.
So you'd have a chance to.
Chairman Ludford.
Let me chime in real quick, since this obviously seems to be pointing in the council's direction. Let me point out that we have an election and a campaign going on in that district. Three people vying for that position, so there's a bit of complexity going on at the moment. So I personally would love to see this buttoned up, zipped up nice, presented to council in a nice, neat package, then to come forward with all of this homework to do with a brand new planning and zoning chairman, which she had missed. Councilwoman Hill is very capable to handle this, but also a council rep that is in the middle of a campaign. And I worry about the attention and the time being able to sift through this very complex situation that very experienced planning commissioners are sifting through at the moment.
Own and not lose it, then I'm okay with a deferral.
I think can I answer that? I think what's happening, I think what Donna's saying is if we remove 15A from the zoning code, they would no longer be eligible to apply for C3. That's not true.
Grandfathered in?
Well, they can still apply for C3.
Okay.
Yeah. They're not going to lose the ability to apply for C3.
I think is that the underlying question, Don?
If we're in process, then it can continue on because we applied under the current zoning regulation. Is that correct?
Is that what you're asking? Because
Yes.
I'm hearing yes, you're under C3.
Okay, so as long as
You're
our
not gonna lose
application keeps moving forward before they rescind, if for some reason it was tabled or withdrawn or denied, then if we had to come back and reapply, which we're like you said, we're very close on the conditions. So as long as we can continue moving forward with the C3, I will be okay with buttoning up because I do agree with you. For all of the reasons that
Are you
said,
saying a 30-day deferral?
we can do a 30-day deferral.
Move to defer 30 days.
We have 7 motions to defer for 30 days. Our previous motion has been withdrawn and seconded. Any discussion on the 30-day deferral? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Does our minute taker have all that? Perfectly, right?
Mr. Chairman, on the next case, under amendments and resolutions, we need to move that to the staff updates. No
Okay.
actions requested. I say a 30-day deferral probably.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion we have a motion for item 24 on our agenda, 30 days. Can I get a second? Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Hey, before we do that, just to make sure because I don't know how long we're going to be with staff, I just want to make sure, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Okay.
Yes. Y'all was supposed to have, my name is Will. On the property of the company at the time. Y'all was supposed to have
We did. That's that Black Creek case.
Black Creek case.
but I see it's been tabled or something, it's not even on the paper.
I think we,
I've had problems with this roadway ever since they started this development. South of a piece of property up there, that I can't even access most of the time. Because the gate's up over the road, that I went to court, got a rule.
okay, so it's very seldom we actually have public comment on non-agenda items. But we do want to make sure we hear from you. Can you come up to the mic, state your name and address for the record, and then tell us specifically what you're commenting on?
Mr. Chairman, I think he's commenting on, I lost it here again. It's for case 2022-138, Andrew Stone, unaddressed Fringe Road, to amend the condition where we changed out the site plan. It had
Okay.
nothing to do with the road closures or anything like that. I think that's what he's talking about.
Okay.
All right, let's get to the road closure.
Well, here,
There's a-
hold on, just 1 second.
Excuse me.
So first on, you'll need to state your name and address for the
My
record.
name is Glendale McNabb. Address is 3916 Cummins Road,
Okay.
Chattanooga,
And then-
Tennessee.
Second, the time limited for public comment on non-agenda items is 5 minutes. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
So went to court about this road when they first started this, about them blocking the road, the access to my property, which in this state, I have unhampered easement and I'm supposed to have a right away to my property. It's not supposed to be hampered, blocked, and keeping me out, which Mr. Andy Stone has told me, just sue me if you don't like it. I've had heavy equipment from Brown Brothers blocking the road back at Christmas. I had to refund $1,000 to 4 people that hunt on me this year and last year because they couldn't get up there to hunt on a public road that's got a gate across it. So now they're trying to change and amend their conditions. What do they want to amend them to? They have not even went by the law. What are they trying to do? I would like to sell them my property. I'm not giving it to them. They've already seized 124 acres that was under a lease for 99 years. It was supposed to return to the property owner, and I own that part of the property. And they're developing it. So I'm a poor man. I'm not like all these folks. I don't have this kind of money. I'm just trying to hold on to what I've got. And I can't even get to it. It's a problem accessing it. Could y'all explain why I can't access my property?
Well, the time on our agenda is for public comment. I don't think anybody here is prepared to respond to your comment. We certainly appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman.
I don't know why, and I don't know that anybody in this room knows why.
Okay. I know I've called the governor's office. I've called the city mayor. I've called the county mayor. I've called
And now you're at planning commission.
I'm at the planning commission now. I've called everybody I could talk to about blocking this access on this road. You know how many phone calls I've got back? Not one. In 20 years, none of y'all have talked to me. Not one of y'all.
Well, we're glad you're here today. Thank you for your comments. I want to make sure we hear from Mr. Reuter here.
We will definitely follow up with this gentleman. I will definitely get with Public Works. We will find out as much information as we can about his issues. And promise to give him my mobile number and happy to meet with him. Sounds like he has some real
Can you
issues.
provide your contact information
Yes, I
to
would.
Karen, who's right here in the back, and make sure that she has that so that somebody from here can try to figure out how to help you.
Okay. I
Thank you for
appreciate
being
it.
here.
Thank you for your time.
I've got a similar issue, actually. Public Works has blocked my alley, and I haven't been able to get to my garage for over 3 weeks. Dan, can you fix that? I'm just kidding. I actually do have that problem. I can see why he's frustrated. All right, we'll let staff.
So, Mr. Chairman, the next several items that are on your agenda are actually just to give you all a heads up. As I told during our lunch, we'll have a RPA, RPC work session on the 21st. Welcome you to be there. We will definitely make sure that the development community is aware of the work session. It's to provide a time for us to publicly give some background on these proposed changes to both the subdivision regs and the zoning ordinance, and to allow public comment, and then we will bring them back before Planning Commission. We will also, before the next meeting, give a little blurb. We'll send you all a memo with a little blurb about each one of these and why it's being requested to change it in the ordinance. Just want to make sure we have a process going forward in the future where we have some dialogue, we have some transparency, we get time for discussion before we put it on the Planning Commission agenda for approval or for recommendation. But that's what those are about, is just to give y'all a heads up that we do intend to have a public meeting and to talk about these and then to bring them back before planning commission.
That's June 21st at 1 to 3 in the DRC at room 1A.
And is that a public meeting or is that just staff and planning commission?
Public meeting.
It's open to the public. So is it,
Public meeting for any public.
is it
intent.
announced?
Yes, it was advertised in the paper.
Okay.
And we're advertising it here. Probably need to put on our website as well.
And will the public be just watching the meeting happen between staff and planning commission, or will the public be engaged in that conversation?
No, I think what we intend to do is staff make and it'll be more than just us, but we will make a presentation about each one of these items. Have an opportunity for comment from planning commission, have an opportunity if somebody there, I would assume it's going to be somebody from the development community or from the engineering community or someone like that, but for them to have a comment, and then we can do a summary of all that, bring it back to the planning commission at the next month, just so we have time to talk about some of these items. I don't think any of them are controversial, although subdivision regs and street standards might have some folks more interested.
That's great. Does staff wish to make any other comments on the staff?
No. And well, I will say one thing. Like, when we send out staff reports, we often the people show up here at the meeting to talk about conditions and changing, and we don't have time to review those. I guess we need to talk about that as a staff. What do we do with things like that? Like you brought up today.
I feel like that's where C3's, I think all those conditions really break down when, staff recommends approval with conditions, and then the applicant has some sort of, difference of opinion in regards to what that condition should be. And then we're here talking about some very specific piece of the conditions, but this has been going on for a long, long time. And we really don't truly have a staff recommendation on the condition, which is what we need. And that's where, I understand you're discussing rescinding the C3 with deviations, but that's where, when that was adopted, it didn't have that. Instead, it had, we're going to C3, here are the standard conditions, here are our deviations, and here are the staff recommendations in regards to each one of those deviations. And that's where the breakdown was on that case earlier.
Well, and they, just so you're aware, when they submitted, they felt very, very strongly, because they had planned on getting C3, I guess, for some time, and felt very strongly that if they changed that to a PUD or something that would have been a little bit easier to digest for everyone, I think, they felt very strongly that they would, at some point in the future, want to come back and make a change to that and have to come back through the process. And they felt very strongly that they did not want to, they were going to somehow be hamstrung later by a PUD.
Shepherd, you're at the mic. I'm surprised to see you back.
What we had thought would happen would be very similar to the case that just was passed at City Council, where there were two cases. And we have had discussions with the city attorney that every time a zoning case is approved, there is a change to Section 38 of the zoning code. And the city of Chattanooga has the authority to make changes on the fly, if you will, and rewrite the zoning code. And so what we had thought was that we would have basically two ordinances, one for what we were requesting and then one for any deviations. And so we were surprised when we got our staff report that it went the other way. And so.
And it was completely unnecessary. It could have been a PUD.
Sure. Okay, so that portion of the agenda is finished, so that's good news. Can I get approval of the Planning Commission minutes of May 9th, 2022? Thank you.
If you parked in the park, if you're a planning commission officer or member and you parked in the parking garage, I've got validation stickers. If you'll come by real quick, we can validate. Thanks.
I heard you have more than enough.
Yeah, they sent me like 100, but I put everybody's name down. I'm gonna track them. So You only get one.
We did have a motion and it was seconded. All in favor for the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Weil, is this your last meeting? Probably is. And it's been 27 years, did you say? Wow. Thank you, Weil. That's really impressive. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Payne.